This is the Week in Sustainability from Sustain.Life. It's where our team of sustainability experts and practitioners share commentary to keep you up to date on developing stories and news.
Hello, and welcome back to the Week in Sustainability. I'm Mitch Voss, and I'm joined by Arcadia Lee, another member of our sustainability team. And we have two stories this week. They really highlight the common themes and developments that support decarbonization, both in the US and EU. The first story we want to talk about is the EPA's final rule on power plant regulations and their aim to reduce pollution. They're also going to enforce stronger standards for carbon emissions. They're going to update the mercury and air toxic standards, as well as impose stricter limits on water pollution and protect communities from coal ash contamination across the US. The other one we want to talk about is the European Parliament's approval of the Net Zero Industry Act, or NZIA. We think this signals a step towards bolstering EU manufacturing of key decarbonization technologies and aiming to enhance competitiveness and support the transition to climate neutrality. So I've been digging through the EPA's recent announcement, and it seems like they're really making a push for cleaner energy. They have some new rules that aim to significantly reduce pollution from fossil fuel power plants. I think this lines up nicely with the Biden-Harris administration's overall climate goals. They're really putting an emphasis on protecting public health while addressing environmental concerns. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting development and also like super great to hear. You did mention that part about like reducing pollution from fossil fuel powered plants. And so I'm just wondering a little bit about like how exactly they're planning to impact existing coal as well as like new natural gas power plants. What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. The existing coal-fired power plants, they're facing stronger carbon pollution standards, and they have a deadline to comply by 2032, which I think is a pretty significant timeline. If they want to continue to operate beyond 2039, these standards that's what's going to be in place. And for new natural gas power plants, they'll be subject to much stricter regulations. These updates uh, to the mercury and air toxic standards, or MATS for short, they've been updated to provide better protection for harmful emissions, which I think is a crucial step for safeguarding both public health and the environment. Overall, I think this is a pretty strong push from the US and the administration to be able to take action and really move forward with reducing these sorts of emissions and their effect on public health.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds like a big improvement. And what about water pollution from coal fired plants? Are they addressing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big part of this movement as well. The stricter limits on water pollution from these plants, they're being implemented across the board, and they're really there to ensure the protection of water resources as well as public health. I think it's an important step and something that shouldn't be overlooked as part of this movement.
Yeah, no, water quality is definitely important to consider. I was also wondering, like, how do these regulations then contribute to the Biden-Harris administration climate goals? Is that, like, how does that sort of feed into what's going on at that level too?
Yeah, one of the things that they're doing is a 90% reduction, or pushing for a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions from power plants. I think that's a big part of the administration's agenda. Uh, it's a significant step towards combating climate change and to start reducing emissions from these sources. And overall, I think a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's pretty ambitious. Like, so what can you tell me about like the expected benefits from like a public health and not only just like the environmental perspective, but also from a public health perspective?
Yeah, overall, the benefits are pretty substantial. They start with obviously carbon emission reduction overall, combating climate change and starting to reduce those emissions is a key part of the movement. It's also going to reduce the emissions, or basically what is coming from these plants right now would be toxic metal emissions, what's coming out from those plants. We're also talking about water pollution. So focusing in on making sure that those regulations are a bit more stringent or tighter to make sure we're preventing water pollution wherever possible. That all of these have positive impacts on both the environment as well as public health. They're
Yeah.
also addressing concerns about environmental justice and some of the things that happen in local communities, overall, it's pretty crucial.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's all fantastic to hear. But I also heard there was a delay in implementing the rules until after the November election. Why do you think that is? I think specifically, like, the delay was for natural gas plants, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think that delay could be due to a couple of different factors. I think there's political considerations at play here. There's also the need for further review. I think it's a bit of a wait and see situation overall.
Gotcha. Yeah. So then I'm wondering, like, how do these regulations provide regulatory certainty then for the industry as a whole? If we're also trying to, it seems like it's maybe in a little bit of competition with ensuring reliable electricity supply as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think by outlining, clear standards and very clear timelines, they have these in place to make sure that compliance is going to be adhered to, or that there will be compliance. I think the regulations give it essentially a roadmap to follow, that it's going to be step by step, you know, making sure that these things are put in place at a certain time. I think that does provide certainty, while also ensuring that we maintain a reliable electricity source for consumers, that we're focusing both on the aspects of, combating climate change, preventing water pollution, while also ensuring that there's a reliable electricity source for consumers.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what about protecting communities from coal ash contamination? Are they addressing that as well?
From my understanding, there are measures that are being put in place to mitigate the risks associated with coal ash and the contamination that comes with it, to protect communities close to these facilities. I think that's an important aspect of these regulations. So making sure that that doesn't happen wherever possible, and it's something that shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, definitely. And finally, just one last question. How do the projected savings and reductions in carbon pollution, how do those things impact the economy and the public health?
Yeah, I think it's around 370 billion is what they're projecting for savings, which is pretty significant. It also is a reduction in carbon pollution that will have a positive impact across the board. Not only does this help the economy with those projected savings, but it's also affecting both things like healthcare costs, improving productivity, and overall lead to cleaner air, water, and overall fewer carbon emissions, which is a win for the environment and public health.
Absolutely, Mitch. That sounds like huge min.
Awesome. I'd love to shift gears a bit here. Let's start talking about what's happening in the EU, NZIA, and the basically that act coming forward. So I've been reading up on the European Parliament's recent approval of the NZIA. It seems like a big move towards decarbonization. What exactly does this legislation aim to achieve?
Yeah, it's a pretty big step forward for the European Union. The Net Zero Industry Act, or NZIA, is really designed to try and bolster European Union's manufacturing of key technologies for climate goals, but only with a particular focus on enhancing competitiveness and supporting a transition to climate neutrality.
Yeah, that does sound really promising. Can you tell us a bit more about how the NZIA plans to accomplish these goals?
Yeah, sure thing. So the legislation targets about 19 specific technologies and includes measures to try to streamline permits, set CO2 storage objectives, and also promote net zero industrial clusters. But really, these initiatives are all geared towards ensuring that the European Union meets about 40% of its technology deployment by 2030 and captures 15% of the global market value.
To me, that sounds pretty ambitious. How does the NZIA fit into the broader context of the EU's efforts to decarbonize?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It was proposed in 2023 as part of the Green Deal Industrial Plan, which outlines their strategy for achieving climate neutrality. And so, by focusing on key technologies and implementing targeted measures, the Net Zero Act plays a really crucial role in trying to advance their decarbonization agenda.
It's interesting to see how these legislative efforts are really shaping the EU's approach to tackling climate change. What are some of the key challenges that the EU might face with actually implementing the NZIA?
Yeah, no, really good question. So, one of the challenges I could see is try to ensure that these member states are going to effectively coordinate with one another to try and meet the targets outlined in the legislation. There also might be some hurdles in terms of like financing and investment for these projects, especially for smaller businesses looking to adopt new technologies. So, those are some of the challenges I can see up front, but there might be new challenges as we move through the process.
That makes sense. There definitely could be challenges as they're trying to implement this. I think collaboration and financial support will definitely be key in driving this success of the implementation of the NZIA. Overall, it seems like the EU is really doubling down on its commitment towards decarbonization. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that 100%. The approval of the NZIA is really a clear indication of the EU's determination to try and really continue, I would say, leading the way in addressing climate change and transitioning to a more sustainable future. So, yeah,
Yeah, I
100% agree.
think it's a great thought to wrap up on. Thanks, everyone. That'll wrap it up for this week in sustainability. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next one.
Sustain.Life is the leading and most comprehensive sustainability software on the market. To learn how we can help your company measure its emissions and take climate action, go to Sustain.Life. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this show on our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.